Qořakh was hungry. He was walking along a countryside road in the rain. It had been hours since he last passed a gas station. It was too late to turn back, and he didn't have any money left. Just my luck, he sighed. Not only had he been discharged for refusing to execute unreasonable orders, but he also couldn't find any job in the cities due to this stain on his failed career. Fighting was the only thing he knew, and the jobs that could take him didn't like his insubordination. So he found himself walking to the next city, his saved funds exhausted before he could purchase a travel pass. He rubbed his 4 scaly arms to chase the cold. His clothes were wet, and his pack was starting to feel heavy. Qořakh looked around him at the winding road following the rolling hills covered in harvested grain fields as far as he could see in the darkness. At this point, he felt miserable and a little desperate. Was he destined to die here in the middle of nowhere? He found it ironic that the mightiest species of the galaxy was in such a pitiful state, stranded in a world he wasn't familiar with for following his beliefs. His meaty arms didn't fit regular work and would impede his dexterous arms otherwise. He was only a quarter of his lifespan, and he felt like he wouldn't live for long like this. His parents must feel ashamed to have a son who is so pathetic he can't help himself. Qořakh continued to trudge through the pouring rain, occasionally wiping his brow and stout muzzle of water. As he crested the next hill, something caught his eye. There, through the rain, he saw the faint glow of a light. He stopped to observe for a moment. When the glow didn't move, he was glad it wasn't a vehicle, as they were too small to fit him. Quickening his pace, he went on until he was parallel to the light from the road. He was standing at the end of a dirt road leading to a wooden farmhouse and barn. The light was shining through the ground floor windows like a beacon he was hopeful to hang on to. Shuddering in the night, he gazed for a moment before deciding to try his chance. With his species' reputation, they most likely would turn him down. Carefully stepping on the creaking stairs of the front porch, he looked more closely at the details. The beings residing here seemed to be of average height, but the door indicated a stance less wide than the norm. The handle appeared made for dexterous hands and the steps for smaller feet than his. Those indicated a few species, but he would need to see them. They must not have a translator here like half the people in the cities he passed through. Luckily, he learned a few dialects. Hopefully, the residents were among those he knew. With one of his secondary hands, he gently knocked at the door. A few moments later, he heard a gruff voice in a speech he half recognized. The door opened slightly, revealing most of a middle-aged Terran staring at him suspiciously, a hand obviously holding a big object behind the door. "Well, you're a big one, ain't you?" he said. Qořakh understood most of the sentence, but he cursed his luck. The Terran languages were the ones he knew the least. He would have to try his best. "What are a lad like you doing out here?" the Terran continued, still partly covered by the door. Qořakh tried to answer slowly to be sure not to forget his words. "Sir, I am only a traveler. I am hungry. I will work for a warm meal and a place to rest." The man looked him up and down before saying, "Boy, I have no place for you." Qořakh's shoulders slumped at those words. Deep down, he knew he would be refused, but he still grabbed at any shred of hope he had. "I understand," he said quietly. Lowering his head, he breathed out in resignation. This may be the last being he talks to in his life. He knew he wouldn't survive the night as it was, but he wouldn't force the hand of a man who didn't do anything bad. So he prepared to leave again, but as he was going to say his thanks, the Terran interjected. "Hold a sec," he said, then closed the door. Different voices were heard through the door. Qořakh recognized the Terran who opened for him, but the other was unknown to him. He couldn't understand what was said due to the muffling effect of the door, but he guessed it was about him. A few seconds later, the Terran opened the door again, pointed to the floor while looking at him, and said, "Wait here." Then he closed the door back. Qořakh was a little confused, but he wasn't going to refuse a reprieve from the rain. He unshouldered his travel pack and leaned it against the wall, then sat cross-legged on the wooden planks. He idly stroked his arms to warm himself as he stared in melancholy at the raining darkness. He was so caught in his misery that he didn't hear the front door open and the pitter-patter of light feet approaching. He was surprised when his ears suddenly picked up a new voice, one he didn't hear before that sounded quite young and excited. "Whoa!" the little voice exclaimed in a whisper. Qořakh's eyes widened at the unique reaction he provoked. Carefully, he turned his head towards the door, and the owner of the voice, standing just as far as their small arms reached. There, standing slightly shorter than Qořakh was sitting, was a Terran youngling that had the piercing eyes of their father and beautiful golden hair glittering from the house light. They had an expression of pure amazement and wonder. Qořakh, knowing how terrifying his form could be, was frozen in place with worry. He knew he could snap the youngling's neck with his brawny arms without effort if he wasn't careful. So he moved only his head as carefully as he could. He looked into the youngling's eyes and strangely found no trace of fear. "Are you a shark?" the youngling asked excitedly. Qořakh found himself unsure of what to do. He had never talked with younglings before. They all stayed far away from him whenever he was around. So he tried the only thing he could think of. Trying not to show his teeth, Qořakh softly answered with a question of his own. "What is a shark?" At those words, the youngling beamed their biggest smile and excitedly explained, See, sharks are this big fish with a big tail like this." They mimed with their hands behind their back. And big fins like this." They waved their arms widely. Oh, and big teeths like yours, mister." The youngling pointed at Qořakh's mouth. He wasn't sure if it was a real animal or not, but his ancestors did evolve from sea-dwelling animals. If there were some like those here, he didn't know. But the youngling's passion was probably for a real creature. He was about to respond when the youngling cut in with another question. "Why do you have 4 arms? Can I touch them?" Qořakh was once again surprised by the eagerness the young showed, not the least bit afraid of what he was. Still, he kept in mind how dangerous he could be and did not want to hurt them. No, I am scary." The youngling tilted their head in confusion. "But you're so pretty," they argued. Qořakh felt conflicted. He knew it was only a matter of time before the youngling saw how scary he really was, but he longed for some kind of kinship. Luckily, he didn't have to think too much, since the Terran he talked to before came back to the door. "What in the Maribel? What are you doing out here?" The little girl ran back to her father with stars in her eyes. Daddy, can I touch him?" The man quickly glanced at Qořakh, then back down at his daughter. "Maribel, now you know what I said about strangers, yeah?" he chastised. "But the mister looks so lonely," she protested. "Maribel, the mister was just taking cover from the rain," he countered. But, she hesitated. "Maribel," the man repeated sternly. "Okay," the girl said with a dejected face. She looked at Qořakh again and said softly, "Bye-bye, mister," then stepped back inside. The Terran watched her go out of view and closed back the door. At this point, Qořakh returned to look into the void while the man approached. Stopping beside him, he placed a plate in front of Qořakh. "Do you need silverware?" the man asked, designating the warm meal. Qořakh raised one of his slender hands. "Please," he answered. "Ah, good," the Terran said, handing him the cutlery before crossing his arms. "'Twill be less messy like this. Bon appétit." He finished in a language Qořakh didn't know, but he took the silverware and ate nonetheless. It was delicious. It had been a while since he ate meat this good. Once done, he gingerly placed back the plate and cutlery in front of him. "Many thanks," he said to the Terran with a bow. The latter stroked his auburn beard with a faint smile on his lips. "Well, I'll be. You weren't kidding. You really been that hungry. It's been a while since someone enjoyed ma roast beef that much," the man said with a chuckle. "Apologies," Qořakh responded. "I not eat since last city." The Terran arched an eyebrow. "Since the last city? Which one?" Qořakh pointed to where he came from. Righton? Ziron?" The man uncrossed his arms in surprise. "Azerton? You came all the way from there?" Qořakh nodded. The Terran leaned back with a hearty laugh. "Well, Halby, you walked for 2 days, no wonder you were hungry, boy." Qořakh was not sure how to take this, so he waited. Don't worry, boy, it just shows you're hardy. The man turned around and opened the door. Many thanks. Qořakh hesitated as he saw the man enter his home. He wondered if it was time for him to go, but he saw the Terran exit as soon as he entered, with 2 long sticks made of fabric in hand. Standing again beside Qořakh, he presented one of the sticks to him. Trust you know how to use an umbrella, he asked. Qořakh wasn't sure since he only knew the magnetic umbrellas, but he guessed they fundamentally worked the same. He nodded and took the handle with his slender hand. He examined the object for a second, then pressed the button at the end of the fabric part. What he wasn't ready for was for the fabric to spring open in his face. Surprised, he let go of the umbrella, which fell down the porch into the drenched grass. Embarrassed at this poor display, Qořakh hid his face behind his meaty palms while the Terran laughed. "Wait here, I'll bring it back," he said between breaths, opening his own umbrella and stepping into the rain. Qořakh, on his part, shook his head and grabbed his pack. Standing up, he took back the umbrella the Terran handed to him again, opened it safely, and joined the man on the lawn. "Many thanks," he said to the Terran, who smiled at him. "Come, follow me," he said, then walked towards the barn. Qořakh followed, but the wet ground underneath his feet was making him shiver again. "You're very polite, boy," the Terran said, distracting him from his sorry state, which he was thankful for. "I study. Parents raise also," he answered. The man whistled a note, then said, "Is that how you learned English?" "I try to learn many languages," Qořakh recalled. "That's good work so far." He paused as he opened the barn door. "Can you fit through here?" he asked. Qořakh felt the wave of warm air coming from inside. He closed the umbrella and leaned forward. It would be tight, but he could pass if he went sideways. Once under the roof, the man showed him an empty stall full of straw. "You can sleep there tonight. Since your clothes are wet, you should hang them to dry," he added, pointing at horizontal poles and beams. He then looked down at Qořakh's feet. Suppose with claws like that, you can't wear shoes, right?" Qořakh nodded but didn't add anything. "Well, that won't be a problem then," the Terran continued, "if you get too cold still." He walked to another stall to pat an equine. "This here's Harold," then waved at a cow in the nearby stall, lazily munching silage. "And that there's Jerry. They will keep you warm." Qořakh was eternally grateful for this kindness, but could only respond with many thanks. The Terran waved him off with a clap on his brawny shoulder. "Bah, enough of that. You said you will work for it, so if you're still here tomorrow when I come, you'll work." Qořakh felt uneasy now since he obviously couldn't work as a laborer. "Apologies, sir. I only know how to fight. I know not how to help." The man looked at him for a moment with an unreadable look before smiling back again. "Well, boy, that's not a problem. These big arms of yours surely can load a ton. Y'all learn in no time." "The name's Albert," he said, pointing a thumb to his chest, then waved at Qořakh. "What do I call ya?" "Name, yes," Qořakh whispered. "Introductions should always be given. My name is Qořakh," he said carefully, trying to enunciate all the words correctly. Albert offered a hand with his warm smile. Qořakh knew of this practice since he studied the most common customs of many species. So, with one of his slender hands, he grasped the man's own, and a firm handshake was given. "Nice to meet ya," the man said, releasing his hold. "Now, I'm gonna let ya rest, and, I'll see ya tomorrow." He waved, then went back out into the rain. Qořakh, now alone with his thoughts, wondered how long this would last. Probably only for the morning. He was not a skilled worker, after all. He wasn't raised to tend to the fields or beasts. Few of his kin were. He doubted Albert would keep him after he knew his story, but at least he would not die today. Qořakh hung his wet vestments to dry and lay down in the straw. He had doubts, but he found himself to be glad for once. Maybe he would try his best here. With those thoughts, he closed his eyes to rest. And for once in a long while, Qořakh had a peaceful sleep with beautiful dreams.